Today we are joined with Sathiya Sam. He's an expert in helping men quit unwanted sexual behavior, has a coaching program, books, resources, great social media content, all kinds of things. So, looking forward to this conversation today. We're just going to pick his brain and learn all about helping people quit unwanted sexual behavior. And so privileged to be with him today. How you doing, Sathiya?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me. Second time's the charm here. Instagram just didn't want it to happen, so I'm glad we're making it work.
That's right. We were trying to do an Instagram live twice, but IG, yes, I'm firing shots. IG, if you hear this, don't punish me. Don't punish me in the algorithm. Uh, Booted us twice. No, we love IG. We love IG.
We do.
Uh,
The
Booted us
servers were having a
twice.
bad day or something. I'm sure it's innocent.
Yeah, too many people going live, so everybody's just getting booted today. But we're doing this conversation, and it's going to be a great podcast. And we were just starting to get into kind of what you're doing, Sathya, and some of the motivations you see that help people really find lasting change, not quit. It can be, I mean, unwanted sexual behavior. It's hard to find the motivation. It's can be such a strong addiction. Tell us more
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give your audience a little bit of context. I was addicted to pornography for 15 years. Grew up in the church, got exposed to porn in the computer lab of my Christian school. That whole kind of shtick. I've been clean since 2016, and I had this prayer during my recovery process, which was, God, if you set me free, I will do everything else in my power to help as many other people experience freedom as well.
Hmm.
And so February 2016, I had my last relapse. And December 8th, 2018 is when I launched DeepClean, which is the organization I run now that's helped, we've helped thousands of people quit pornography. And I was telling you before we hit record, we've had a lot of guys successfully quit. Our success rate hovers around 70%. There's a couple of conditions attached to it, which we can get into. But we have a lot of guys who, after they quit, they say, hey, like, what's next? We want to rebuild our lives. We want to rebuild marriages, whatever it is. So we've been doing a lot of data collection, a lot of research and surveying. 1,500 people that have come through our services specifically that I've worked with, and then another 10,000 who have learned our system through our book, The Last Relapse. And so lots of data that's helped us identify, number one, what that next solution is. And we're kind of working on a new program for that. But then, like you're asking about the motivations, why do people struggle in the first place? And what do success stories even have in common for that 70% that are quitting pornography? And it's really two things. I think the one is you have people who reach a pain line. Pornography sticks around in your life as long as the pain it's causing you is less than the pleasure it's providing.
Hmm.
And once that teeter-totter switches, balances, that's usually when people reach out for help. A guy goes to a massage parlor, guy has an affair, guy starts watching content that he never thought he'd watch. It's some sort of line gets crossed. We don't like it when people come to us in those scenarios. So a lot of our content online is trying to get people's attention before they reach that point,
Hmm.
because unfortunately when people reach that point, depending on what we're talking about, but especially with affairs, we can help you quit pornography, and we're very grateful people have come to us, but we can't guarantee that their marriage is going to last or survive. And we just rather your marriage doesn't reach that point where it's threatened, right? So that's the first category. The second category of motivation, which is what we really try to foster in our audiences, especially on our podcast, is having a vision that does not have any room for pornography. Like having this deep conviction of what God's called you to, of what you were made for, of how much better your life could be. A lot of people, when they quit pornography, they become more productive, they get promotions at work, or some of them make the leap and maybe start a business they always want to start. So we try to really tie that in, the dream marriage, being a father that raises kids who don't fall into pornography, trying to really tap into, I think, more of a desire-based approach. That's my preference. That's what I like to see in my clients a lot more. But truthfully, either the pain or kind of the big vision, those things are usually the big motivators that keep people through till the very end.
Hmm. Yeah, that's good because it's like I know in my own life, hitting rock bottom 13 or 15 years ago, just like, man, I'm sick and tired of struggling with this. I'm sick and tired of making promises to God that I
Yeah.
can't keep. Um, it was just ruining my life, porn in
Yeah.
so many ways. And the pain got so bad, but then I say pain and pleasure motivate people. The pleasure, the vision of what if I could go into marriage one day without this? What if I could have a future healthy family because I didn't come from a healthy family? What if
Mm.
life could be so much better, porn free, walking around without the guilt, without the shame, without these skeletons in my closet, feeling like I'm living a double life as a Christian.
Yeah.
Um, and having that ever before me, because it can be so, when it first happens, when you hit rock bottom, when you kind of have that pain and that vision, it can be motivating at first, you know, and
Yeah, that's right.
that leads people to a lot of the binge purge cycle, right? Where
Uh-huh.
they like binge, they look at porn a bunch for several days, but then they finally think they've quit, and they put their willpower to the test, and they're like, yes, I'm finally free, and then just to return to it because it doesn't last. But keeping
Yeah,
that
well, if I
vision.
can add to that, I mean, we have, talking about people who have affairs and that's why they come to us. Like that's a very common one. Or maybe it's not even affairs. Maybe just that they didn't disclose anything to their wife. Their wife found some pornography on their device or somehow found out they were watching and is really upset, and is maybe threatening divorce or threatening to leave.
Mm,
And when a client comes with us, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm the reason I want to quit porn is I need to get my wife back. And again, I don't mind that. Like, what if it's motivating you right now, it's fine. But I really agree with what you said. We know that long term, that's actually not the greatest motivation in the world because number one, it's beyond your control. Like, your wife's gonna make her own decisions. But number two is you can forge something for a couple months. I mean,
mm,
I in my 15-year struggle. I had bouts where I didn't watch pornography for over a year, but I still
mm,
fell back into it.
mm-hmm,
So if we're talking about like lasting freedom, something that's actually going to stand the test of time, yeah, you have to really be careful with those motivations. They have to be deep-seated. They have to be within kind of your arena of control, and they can't just be from the emotionality of a really bad mess up or something else like that. There has to be a bit more groundedness to it. I thought that was a great point.
mm. Yeah. So tell me, in your experience, I mean, I feel like working with 1,500 guys the past couple of years, you have kind of a fresh perspective on what is leading people into um, pornography. Decades ago, Patrick Carnes, the whole certified sex addiction therapy. Um, I think there was three themes they said led somebody into an addiction. One was an addictive society, just how we're all addicted to something and consumeristic. And that second was family of origin, and then third was personal trauma.
Mm.
I tend to still think that we all experience trauma and that leads somebody to an addiction in some ways, but we also know that porn is in people's pockets and they're discovering it left and right. And even if
Yeah.
I've met people who come from a relatively healthy family and they're still getting addicted to porn. What are you seeing are the common causes that lead someone into porn addiction, or maybe some other kind of sexual addiction?
I mean, so, when you have like a client base like we do, we've worked with young and old and rich and poor and everything in between. So there definitely are those things like trauma, family of origin. I think some of those things that you mentioned there on Carnes's list are very relevant. For me, what I've observed personally, and even scouring the data, I used to be a university researcher, so it's very
Mm,
important to me. I would say probably the number one predictor is early exposure.
wow.
Like nothing is more telling that somebody is primed for a pornography addiction than getting exposed before the age of 11.
Mm,
Um, and it is interesting. This was something I was observing in our client base probably about 2 years ago is when I was starting to kind of just hear it a lot. And then Exodus Cry, I had Benji
mm-hmm,
Nola. I don't know if you've interacted with him at all, but they're amazing. He's the founder of the movement, and their focus is a lot more on trafficking. But
mm,
after they did their first documentary, they were trying to identify like, okay, so where does like what's more at the seed bed? The first documentary was just exposing how bad trafficking is, how prevalent it is, and that we need to do something about it. And so they spent 5 years studying like the red light districts and trying to just figure out what are the commonalities between people that come to these brothels and are paying for sex and um, all of that. And basically, what they realized is same deal, young and old, rich and poor, Netherlands, Thailand, Cambodia, America, it didn't matter where they were. The one thing that everybody seemed to have in common that was specifically coming and buying sex or paying for sexual activity is they were exposed to pornography at a young age.
Wow.
So I think there's a lot of angles to this, but early exposure seems to be the first big domino to fall.
Mm,
And it does so in a very sneaky way because, again, I don't know what your story was, Ben. I know for me, I was exposed to pornography. I didn't go home and just start binging it, like it was a very gradual progression for me.
hmm
But then it was like 4 or 5 years later where I look back, I was 16 years old at that point, and I thought, man, I watched a lot of this. And by the time in university, it's now like a daily habit, and I'm planning my days around it. Like it was very gradual. So I think that's why early exposure is so dangerous. Is it becomes the gateway, but it happens in a very sly and sneaky kind of way.
Wow. Yeah, it's so fascinating how, in stuff I've read about the child, your brain in childhood and what God created you to experience versus not experience, see versus not see, certain things just imprint in your brain as a
Mm,
kid. Um, Traumatic situations. I think for me, seeing hardcore pornography at the age of 12 traumatized my brain because it was
yeah.
so unexpected,
Oh yeah.
shocking. Uh, the response I had seeing it was similar to other traumatic experiences where it was too much too soon. It was overwhelming. I didn't know how
Mm,
to process it. And I think for so many people, I mean, I'm not saying sexual abuse is the same as pornography, but some people, researchers have said that kids being exposed to pornography is a version of sexual abuse because
yeah.
kids were
I
not
could see
meant to
that.
see that and they can't process it and experience it. And so that makes so much sense why that would be such a key in the hook being set in them to later kind of return to it.
Yeah. Well, and also we're talking about pornography in 2024. When I was getting exposed to pornography and getting into it, I mean, granted, hardcore pornography was around, but it
Mm,
wasn't as prevalent as it is now. And now there's even data that would suggest like most of mainstream pornography, it's been a while since I actually combed the research, but a few years ago, it was 80% of mainstream pornography involved at least one scene of violence or aggression towards the
yeah,
woman. So the nature of the content has really intensified, and I think that that would be interesting actually to see if that research follows through, like if they can actually certifiably say like just getting exposed to pornography at a certain age is actually traumatic, because I think especially if we're talking about today's pornography, there's a really good case to be made for that because it is so intense and it's so extreme, and what 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old brain could actually process that effectively. It's impossible.
right. And it's become the new sex ed for an entire generation. I remember reading a study. I think this was before, no, this was 2021. Um, they interviewed teenagers and asked them what is the main source of their sexual education or what has contributed the most to what they've learned about sex. And they didn't say sex ed in high school. They didn't say their parents. They said pornography. And when it's violent, when it's abusive, when it's so aggressive and demeaning and has,
Yeah.
a racism in it, sexism in it, even themes of PDF files to censor that word. If you know what we're talking about, it's wild what people are learning, watching, thinking is sex.
Yeah. Billie Eilish was maybe the most prominent example of this. And she even said that like she learned about sex through pornography. And then when she was starting to be sexually active, she engaged in things that felt demeaning, they felt degrading, something about them felt wrong. And she just assumed, but this must be what sex is, because this is
Mm,
all I've seen. This is kind of all I've known. So it's bad enough that kids won't go to their parents to learn about this stuff, or parents, I suppose, won't go to their kids to teach them, to be more accurate. But then when you think about what they're learning and how inaccurate they're learning, it's like somebody watching, watching people fly planes on YouTube, and they think that's what a car is. Then they get in a car and they have no idea what it's supposed to do or how it's supposed to operate. Like your concept is so far from reality and what's true that you're set up for failure. There's just no way you could have healthy sexual experiences when porn is your teacher.
Right. So, what are some of the key solutions you found to really help people get free? Because we always talk about how, resolution movement, we used to call it resolution movement because we wanted to resolution people because there's so many bad
Yeah.
solutions out there. I
Oh
experienced so
man.
many bad solutions trying to quit porn, over spiritualized solutions, just trying to pray it away, just trying to memorize Bible verses about why lust is wrong. And I never got to the deeper issues actually driving my porn use. So, what are some of the top things you're seeing, in 2024, set people free?
My story was very similar. It was internet filters and it was upping spiritual disciplines, and I'm a relatively self-disciplined dude, so I thought I could kind of willpower my way through the whole thing. And that's actually what birthed a lot of this, was just
Mm,
frustration that we weren't having more honest conversations about how you actually quit pornography. And I think ultimately what I concluded is a lot of the solutions out there, and the ones I just mentioned and the ones you just mentioned, it's kind of the equivalent of running over a weed with a lawnmower. Like you might clear it out and temporarily everything looks fine, but as long as the root system is there, that weed is going to grow back one way or another. And sometimes the way it grows back can be pretty nasty. So I think a lot of Christians, and you don't even have to be faith-based, just a lot of people in general are trying to quit this debilitating addiction with solutions that aren't actually getting to the roots. So I think when it comes to what's actually working for people and why somebody is successful versus why they're not, guaranteed the person who is successful has actually gone through some sort of process or system that is addressing the underlying causes. So we're not just memorizing scripture. We're not just talking about how to breathe your way through a temptation. And those things are all valid and maybe have their place. But what we're trying to do is, when we say get to the roots, we're trying to get upstream. We're trying to get ahead of this thing before it reaches a point where you're super tempted and you might give in, depending on how much willpower you have that day. Trying to get ahead of this thing. So again, lots of different angles to this. Our system, the DeepClean system, and what I've observed in all of my colleagues and all the recovery stories I've heard over the years between our clients and other people, basically we boil the root systems down to three categories. So people always ask us, like, okay, I know I need to get to the roots. What are my roots? And I would say you probably have issues in all three of these buckets, just varying degrees.
mm,
So the first is self-awareness. And I'm the prototypical example of somebody who had no self-awareness. I lost a bunch of friends to suicide when I was in high school,
wow.
including my best friend. And I actually still remember this, Ben. I was just come home from the funeral of my friend Chucky. He was 15 years old when he passed, and I was 14. And I remember just purposing in my heart, I will never cry about this again. I will never cry about this again. I had such a hard heart because the pain was too much and I was not taught how to deal with the emotions. And that kind of set me on course for a very calloused, numb heart. And I was a nice guy. I wasn't a calloused person. I was just calloused emotionally. And that lack of self-awareness really debilitated me in recovery because I couldn't tell you why I was watching. I couldn't tell you the feelings, the thoughts, the belief systems. I mean, I was totally numb to all of it. And it kept me captive. Like it was just, there was information that was there, but I couldn't pinpoint it. So all my solutions were with very limited or no data. So that's a really big one. I mean, we work exclusively with men. So men in particular really need a lot of help in this area to get comfortable just exploring that area, but then to become articulate and to be able to kind of identify what's going on. The second bucket or category is what we were talking a little bit about earlier. We call this transformation of the heart, but what we're really talking about is trauma, childhood, upbringing, environments that you grew up in, early sexual experiences. Um, just being able to work through these and resolve them. And we were yet to have a client who didn't have something that they needed to tackle in this department. And even myself, I'd be an example of I had a great childhood. Parents were very stable. There was nothing really on the outside that looked problematic. I still had trauma to work through, and we could get into that if that's useful. And the third category is identity. So we call it shifting your identity. And there's some old adages around addiction, like once an addict, always an addict.
Mm,
We're not really big believers in that. We really believe that you can actually shift your identity completely and not wake up being like, man, I'm just one bad decision away from slipping, but actually experience legitimate freedom
mhm.
where that person that you once was, that you once were, is so far back in the rearview mirror you don't even recognize it. And so that those are the three things that I would say, like, if it doesn't, again, it doesn't have to be deep clean in what we do, but if you're going to go through recovery and you want to stack the odds in your favor, you should probably be hitting on all three of these pillars.
Right. Yeah, those are those are powerful, especially I think it's easy to it's easy for me to see people focus on maybe one of those, trying one of those, but when, the three combined, man, it's like Captain Planet, just our powers combined, just all three double wham or triple whammy for
Yeah.
an addiction. And yeah, you said something um interesting earlier, and I think I hinted at it at the beginning of this, that I'm convinced all of us, in a broken, fallen world have trauma, even if we come from families that are healthy in so many ways. Dr. Mark Laser, who was a certified sex addiction therapist
Yeah.
for decades, started back in the 90s. He said that there's no good families, there's no bad families. It's not that black and
Mm,
white. And
mm.
even in some of my language, sometimes it's like this person came from a healthy family, yet they were addicted to pornography, or this person came from an unhealthy family. I'm continuing to have to correct that in my language because we live in a fallen world. And so no family is perfectly healthy and no family is perfectly unhealthy, if that's the way you could say it. So I'm just curious
Yeah.
what you would say. What are some ways that people can experience trauma even when they come from a family that is by and large pretty healthy as their kids?
Yeah, I think for people who do identify more with that narrative, like I had a good upbringing, my childhood was healthy. Number one, I get it, that was me. And I think the I had a cultural dynamic at play as well. So my dad was a pastor, and then my parents are both Indian. So you have two different arenas that basically tell you the same message, which is that you protect the name of the family. Don't bring shame to the family, all that kind of stuff. So for me, the idea of acknowledging that my parents had come up short, I was basically programmed to not do that.
Mm,
So for those that are listening that maybe have a dimension like that as well, um, I get it. I would say the challenge when you have the narrative that everything was healthy and everything was good is that you're going to be a lot more likely to overlook a root issue. Like, these are the people that are the sometimes the most difficult to work with because that narrative often prevents you from having access to your solutions. What I would say is, for most people in this case, it is rarely about what was done to them. It's not like we dive a little bit deeper, we probe around, we ask some questions, and it turns out, oh, they had all these traumatic things happen to them. Very rarely. Sometimes that is the case. What's more often the case is they had things that did not happen to them.
mm,
And it's the what didn't happen that actually ends up causing the disintegration or the trauma. And again, my story would be a great example of this. So my mom is an amazing woman, took care of me, loved me, served me really well, took care of a lot of felt needs. Not a very expressive person verbally, and not really physically affectionate at all. And so in my processing, I was working with a therapist as well when I was in recovery. And I realized that I had basically grown up most of my life feeling neglected by my mom. Not
mm,
neglected in like a call child services, this kid's not getting fed kind of way. Neglected, just not getting love in the way that I needed it to feel like I was valuable enough and worthy of love. And so that maternal deficiency eventually led to chasing girls and watching obscure amounts of pornography. And that is an example where something that didn't happen was my trauma, but it really played into my relationship with pornography and eventually my addiction. And the cool thing about this, and hopefully this encourages people who are still maybe a little bit reticent about, broaching these subjects and looking in your past. The really cool thing about this is when this came up in therapy, my therapist was kind of talking me through this and asking me if I wanted to forgive my mom. And I was really eager to, my heart was ready for it, and we had talked things through and whatever. And I still remember, like, if I look back on my recovery process, which was about 5 years from start to finish, most of it was getting 1% better every single day. And then you look back over 6 months or
Mm.
2 years and you
Mhm.
say, wow, okay, I've come a long way. Day to day, it's kind of boring. And sometimes you wonder if anything's really happening, but you just have to trust you're doing the right things. But the day I forgave my mom, I walked out of that office and I felt the difference. Like something had
Mm.
tangibly shifted. And I still got tempted, but the temptations weren't as strong. And I still thought about pornography, but I didn't really think about it as much. And I was in more control of my life than I had ever felt before. And so I think it's a really big deal when people have this narrative that childhood has been good to them, things were relatively healthy. It's like, man, you might be one discovery away from really breaking this door wide open. If you're willing to be brave enough to explore these things a bit, I think you'd be amazed at what you'd find and what you'd experience on the other side of healing from it.
Mm. Yeah, it's so powerful. What what would you say are, as you think about the past couple years working with so many people, what are some of the most your favorite stories of people, just to encourage people listening who feel stuck or like they've tried everything? What are some of the stories that you're allowed to share
Yeah.
that come to mind for you?
Yeah, you know what? A couple come to mind right away. I'll tell you two that have been really inspiring for me. So, um, we just finished working with a doctor. He's very reputable. Um, we can't really share anything beyond that, but he's a doctor. He's really highly regarded in his field. And when he came to us very skeptical. And the main reason is he's one of those guys who's almost a little bit too smart for his own good. And so he's got everything's logicked out, and grew up in a very kind of religious home, very religious upbringing, and knew he needed to do something, but kind of just was coming in, gritting his teeth a little bit. And so a couple things happened with this guy in particular. But the two I would say is number one, the identity piece. So we talked about the three pillars, right? Self-awareness,
Mm.
transformation of the heart, and shifting your identity. That identity shifting thing for him was massive. He had such low self-image, despite being, again, regarded in his field and very intelligent, really, really low self-esteem. And so that was a huge point of focus in the coaching, was really helping him to learn to love himself, value himself, and get out some of the kind of religious dogma that had this like God is angry at me, God can never forgive me, that all that kind of stuff. That was the big thing. The second thing that happened as a byproduct of that is he began to just want connection more. So he's connecting with guys more on the group calls, he's plugging into the community. And then we just found out some new information. I don't know why it took him so long to share this with us, but um, basically, about 5 years ago, he was in a very serious relationship, ready to get engaged to a girl, and she did not want to marry him because he was struggling with pornography.
Mm.
And they wound up breaking up. He lost the relationship. It devastated him, and we found out that's why he was coming in so skeptical. He was actually hurt, and so he wanted to quit pornography, but he really didn't think he could do it after all it had cost him. And while he's been going through a program, he reconnected with the same girl that broke up with him 5 years ago. They've gotten back together and now they're engaged.
Mm.
And the cool thing is she's feeling the difference in their connection. Because remember, like pornography is so shame-based, so you naturally hide. That's the voice of shame. It tells you to hide and stay hidden. And it led to a lot of their disconnection when they were previously together. And this relationship, she's noticing the change. It's not just that he's clean of pornography, which is obviously very stabilizing for a relationship, but she can feel the emotional connection because this guy's heart has been opened up again. And in a lot of ways, it's not just open again, but he has a depth of self-awareness and emotional intelligence that he never had before. And so that one's really cool. And then this story is a little while back, but another really interesting one. We worked with a professional athlete. This guy was a college basketball superstar, made it into the NBA, and then most of his career was played overseas in Europe. And he was coming to us in a transitory season of his life. So he had finished playing basketball, he had some injuries, and um, he was kind of settling down, and life was pretty good for him as a single guy. And then he met a girl, and very similar to the other story I shared, this girl was everything he wanted. Like he had the list and she checked all the boxes. It was that kind of deal. And at some point, pornography came up and she said to
Mm.
him, "Hey, just so you know, I consider porn to be cheating and I would never marry somebody who struggles with it." And he was like, "Oh, okay, well, then I guess I have some work to do." You know, that was something that had been kind of lingering around in his life. And when he came to us, he would have been a great example of somebody who lacked self-awareness. You know, the athlete mindset, which is that you push past the pain, you ignore how you feel, and you kind of just get the job done, which obviously served him very well in that career. But now in a relationship and in his struggle with pornography addiction, it was hurting him. So a big thing with this athlete was just helping him work through how to label emotions and how to define what you're thinking and how to kind of build that awareness of the inner life. And in that process, he was like, you know what, I think I need to get rid of my TV. And I noticed that at night I seem to make my cravings go a lot higher.
Mm.
And so he was starting to pay attention to his patterns. He was realizing like, oh wow, I'm dealing with a lot of anger and frustration. It actually happens earlier in the day, but it's just that I get home from work and then boom, everything surfaces. So now he's able to nip things in the bud a lot earlier. He's just regaining control. And it's a very bittersweet ending, this story, because Patrick's his name, and he's given us permission to share his name. Patrick quit pornography just a couple of weeks before he was supposed to get married. And so they had gone engaged while we were working with him, and everything was going in the right direction. And he left the house one day and he rolled his vehicle at a stop sign and he wasn't wearing his seatbelt and he wound up getting paralyzed from the waist down.
Oh,
And it delayed their wedding. They did end up getting married, but it completely altered the trajectory of his life. I mean, this is an athlete. Like his body has been
yeah.
his life for 2 decades. And the really cool thing is because he had built this skill of self-awareness, not only was it helping him prevent relapses while he was going through a really tumultuous time of his life, it was actually helping him process a completely debilitating and traumatizing season in a way that was, relatively healthy. And granted, he had a lot of people to support him along the way. He's doing amazing. He's sharing a story now. I mean, this guy shared stages with Tim Tebow and that kind of thing. I mean, he's
Mm.
absolutely crushing it. But it's a great example, Ben, and I feel like I see this in your story, which is that if you go about recovery the right way, you develop skills that serve you in other areas of your life as well. And it's a really good example of just that roots-based approach and how it not just helped him experience freedom, but really step into some powerful things that God has called him to in this season.
Yeah, man, what wild stories. I'm sure you've got so many more.
I
And
could
it
go
and
all
it kind
day,
of
man.
reminds me of
Never gets
what
old.
my first CSAT counselor, Dr. Ted Roberts, said that porn addiction is not about sex, it's an intimacy disorder, and
Hmm.
how it's about bonding and connecting. And so often we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to process our emotions or connect relationally, and we're avoidant and shut down. And then pornography enters in. But how much, like, our life just starts to completely change as we address the real roots. We become a healthier person, know how to process our emotions. For me, it was my mental health got so much better. I learned how to deal with anxiety and depression in healthy ways and start to overcome it as I dealt with the porn addiction as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, man. Well, I really appreciate your time. Tell us more about DeepClean, where people can keep up with you, what resources you have, and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, we got a bunch. I think what would be great for your audience is our podcast is called Man Within. We had you on there when you launched your book a little while ago, and we've had we're like 3 to 4 episodes a week kind of podcast. So we do interviews with experts like Ben, and then we also do teaching segments and really try to deliver as much value as possible. So over 800 episodes. If people maybe want to hear more about a specific subject, I can guarantee we've probably done a piece of content about it. And then my book, The Last Relapse, you can get that for free at thelastrelapsebook.com. That's just kind of our way of getting this system that's been so effective into as many hands as possible. like I mentioned at the beginning, that's been read by over 10,000 people. Like it's just our system. The system's in the book. It's a great way for people to, yeah, to learn what we do. And then you can, I would say, start there. And then if you want more services from us or you want us to really guide you through it, then you can go check out our website. All the details are there to work with us, and we'd love to work with anybody who's seriously looking to quit pornography.
Yes, love it. Definitely check it out. Sathiya, thanks so much for being with us today. I enjoy this conversation. I know it's going to encourage a lot of people. And for those watching or listening, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe to the Resolution Podcast, like this episode, and share it with a friend to encourage them. We'll see you soon.